Good evening from yammybtv. Wishing you all well today. Sending loads of love as usual. I'm having to count to 3 at the moment because Zeph, Terence, and I think a couple of others are saying the first 3 seconds of the video, the volume doesn't come out. So I'm going to try and get it mended tomorrow. I went to see the geezer today and he wasn't there. So I'll probably press the button. You know what I'm like with technology, and it's probably gone down somewhere along the line there. I just finished travelling, got more travelling to do. It's not as cold as it was yesterday out there. Wishing you all well, as usual. Tonight's video, right, in no particular order, I'm going to be talking about the robbing of your fellow criminal. Now, we've had the great Brian Cockerell on my show already, and legendarily called the Taxman. Now, in my opinion, my view, for many, that means obviously robbing your fellow criminal and taxing them or taking a piece of their pie. But the ones I'm talking about tonight are the barefaced robbers, right? Some from London, some from other parts of the country. I bumped into a few cold-hearted, callous, with no regrets, no feeling whatsoever, and taking big risks. I think I was one of them for a little while, in whatever capacity, if you like. But it's a very, very dangerous game. Many have lost their life later on in life. Many are not quite the same men as they once was. You've got too much stuff to worry about when you do stuff like that, because, you know, when people get violated or disrespected, their egos drop a little bit and they're not who they think they were. And getting robbed when you think you're a top criminal by somebody else can leave you feeling belittled for quite some time. Probably never ever leaves men years later, if you like, and repercussions. It doesn't have to happen now. It could happen a month, 2 months later. You know, that some of the things I did were, you know, at risk, and still at risk, probably fair to say as well, with some of the things that I've done, shamefully so. Right, so the video I'm doing tonight are on barefaced robbers. It's not in no particular order, but I'm going to give you a rundown on why, who, and some of the things I saw inside, because it's not always the ones that are armed robbers and jumping over counters. They don't necessarily come to jail and rob men for their possessions. They probably see it as a bit low-life kind of movie, if you like, and in some ways it is, because like stealing off your own. But in the other side of the coin, like you're stealing off a criminal after you've already stolen from somebody that wasn't a criminal, doesn't really tally up a little bit. Not making no excuses for the game, but you know what goes around comes around, if you get what I mean. And dog eat dog in there, it's fair to say, as well. But some of the ones I met along the way, my days, they will live in the memory for a long, long, long time. It happens more and more now. A lot of the youngsters do it. In the old days, you had your 1 and 2 on the landing, or 1 or 2 on one wing. Now you've got all of them that are prepared to rob each other at some stage. So it seems to be a regular thing now, where it wasn't so much in the old days. And if you did it too much in the old days, a hit would be put out on you, or something would be done to you. Now, as I was saying, the ones I'm talking about are mostly from prison, but they also were robbers outside, right? And also, there's a couple I'm going to mention that are hardcore robbers of drug dealers, or were, and I saw them on a couple of occasions as well do the same thing in prison. So I'm going to start with one. Many of you might be young enough to maybe to have heard some of these names, or maybe some of you might not remember some of the names at all. But you, around my age and 40 upwards, I would say, if you went to prison, you would have bumped into some of these names, especially the ones from London as well. There are a few of you, quite many of you, that keep asking me about Big Frank Burley, who sadly, rest in peace, is no longer with us. And fair to say, common knowledge, nothing like I'm saying that nobody doesn't know, you know, was meant to have been robbing drug dealers whilst he was out, especially after finishing the 14 that he did for the robbery in Blackpool, where there was hostages. I think that was the time when I saw him twice during that sentence. But during that sentence, I also, on one occasion, saw him take a big lump of puff off somebody in a cell once as well. So he was meant to have been a robber outside, but I did with my own eyes witness him robbing someone in jail as well. Probably a little bit more classier than the ones like me and some of the ones I'm going to mention now. So yeah, pity about Frank as well. I was going to go into another subject afterwards about, you know, when criminal gets murdered by criminal. It's quite often I find, looking through things since I've been out, that a lot don't get convicted, or do the police not try hard enough to catch their killers. This is a whole different subject, but anyway, I'm going to start with Neville Douglas. Now, Neville Douglas was from East London, right? Very, very strong for his age. Well, I was in Stamford House with him, then I was in Ashford with him, right? So he was from Hackney, right? And in the early days, there was Lambeth holding cells. And during that time, there was another geezer. So he was from East. There was another geezer from South London. I think he was from Junction. His name was Appleby. And they were both like a bit the same, except that Appleby was a bit more, didn't have as much class, if you like, right? But those were the early barefaced robbers I saw. When you used to bring your kit into Lambeth holding cells, they used to stand at the door, and when cell doors used to shut, because Lambeth was a holding place for all courts and magistrates' courts and whatnot, and you'd have to wait for your name to be called out before you get it. Was like all the prisons would send you there to that one place in Lambeth to be picked up individually for whatever court you are going to. So my first vision of these guys, Neville and Appleby, were that they would walk around the whole of the cell and go through everybody's shopping bags and take their canteen, take everything, stand them up, pat them down, basically stripping them bare. On the odd occasion, you know, a few weeks, you know, of seeing this kind of behaviour, there'd be the odd geezer that will stand up and say, no, I'm not having it. I'm going to fight back. You know, where they were physically bigger than most for their age. I didn't really see them come unstuck. Now, interesting later on in life as well now, I saw Neville in and out of doing time loads of times, and one such time we was in Swellside as well when everybody was there at that time, and he's taken a chain, big chain off someone, right? But everyone was onto him to give the chain back. Now, he kept saying it was plugged, like pushed up his backside, that don't worry, he will sort it out and get the chain back. So what he's done, he's waited about 48 hours. He's got what his missus or something to come up and handed the chain out, right? So he's had everyone over. So he's made everybody wait and everything. And I've been watching him do this kind of stuff for years and years and years, but only on this occasion now. He was messing with the wrong people, and a couple of geezers from South and another geezer from North by the pool table threw hot fat over him, burnt up his whole face, and about 3 or 4 men beat him with the snooker cues as well. So he got a real hiding, right? Years later, funny enough, I saw him in Parkhurst just as it was changing, and he was a shadow of his former self. Now, Appleby in the 90s and late 80s was a real handful. I saw him ruck with screws quite regular, a bit strange. Didn't used to talk a lot, Appleby. He just used to size you up and then just pull you aside and want to go through your pockets and them things there. But interesting as well with him, with a bad reputation outside as well. He had a right team round him once, and he used to go round robbing drug dealers quite frequently down in South London. But I saw him again years later, and he didn't recognise nobody. He wasn't the same man. Whatever drugs did to him or whatever that life did to him, he was a shadow of his former self as well. But one person I've been dying to mention as well is Kenny Loren, right? Those who have done Bird might have bumped into big, tall Kenny, light skin, from the Grove, Ladbroke Grove, right? Now, my earliest memories of Kenny was when I was really younger, right? So he'd be 3, 4, 5, 6 years older than me. When he was 19, I was something like 14 and just about to embark on my criminal career. I was down in a pub on the outside because I couldn't get into the pub because I was too small. And I'll always remember a crowded pub in Earls Court, right? And there were a few geezers from South. There were a few geezers from all over the place. And I'll never forget watching him walk over to a dark geezer from Brixton. Big household name, Dennis W, right? Say no more. And he walked over to him, grabbed him up, shook him around a little bit. And this DW ain't no mug at all. And he ain't physically a mug either. But he took his chain and he took his chops and his chain off him and bopped off with it. And I remember when he was coming through the door, I remember a couple of people saying, listen, don't you know who that is? You need to be careful what you've done there. And Kenny going, nothing for me, can't tell me nothing. Didn't know who it was, didn't even really care. A couple of days later, right? I wasn't there on this bit, but obviously I got the feedback later on. A couple of days later, and I got both stories from both geezers, both of them in later life as well for that part of it, because I didn't see that bit. Apparently, DW came in 2 days later and went right up in front of everyone with a chopper, machete, and just chopped his shoulder basically in half, where his blood all over the place, and he had to stagger out of it. But I don't think he got the chain and the bracelet back. But those were the kind of things Kenny used to do, and in prison as well. I used to see him line up people outside. You know, like one time we was in Swellside when everybody was there as well. And you remember the phone cards were about them days. And he used to line them all. He used to get like 8 different geezers to line up. He'd say, yeah, got gear, line up outside my cell. When you're ready, give me the cards and blah, blah, blah. He used to get all the cards together. And I was like a bit bad, but Kenny was on a different level to me, right? He used to take all the cards and then just basically tell them all that you're knocked and walk off. Nobody used to say nothing. I know, it's mad, isn't it? But obviously he had his wars as well and troubles as well, because living that life like that, I don't know how even me, I used to live tense and on edge all the time, because the comebacks can be at any time. You know, the person that you robbed might not be the one that has to do it. He could get anyone to do it. But you know, that is Kenny, and those who met Kenny. If I ever told you about the story in Long Lartin where a man crept up behind a man and stabbed him with a sauce bottle, and that was him. If you want me to tell you the truth, that was Kenny. And Kenny come and he got chased out by another one who was a hardcore barefaced robber, Barry W from Liverpool. No playing, had his defeats along the years, but won many battles as well. But another barefaced robber, and some would say an out liberty taker as well. But again, faced the music when he had to. Faced the music when he had to. Now, I talked about him in other videos, right? Another geezer called H, right, Erman, right, from Junction. Many of you would know him as well. I'm not going to say his full name, right? You remember the day when I got stabbed in Swellside? That was with him, telling the story now, right? Even when he got the stab in his chest that day, he was like the thing. But I was the one that made all the moves and took all the stabs that day for him. But he used to make them pull it out their hand, and rather than like try and blag his way or try to get it out of their hand, as soon as they used to come out their hand, he used to just go bang, knock them spark out, and take the parcel. And what was the one I was going to tell you? One of that famous one. I'll get back to it. But he was absolutely legendary and feared no one. And anyone who was around at that time, he might have been disliked a lot, but they definitely feared him, right? There was about 3 or 4 more. Hold on, a couple more I was going to talk about. Who was it again? Let me look down at the fucking... Who was I talking? Oh, of course, Arthur Penny. Sorry about that. My notes, my brain today ain't working properly. Rest in peace, the great Arthur Penny, right? Barefaced robber, right? So funny sometimes, right? At one time we was in somewhere, the Cat A's, and someone had a pair of shoes he liked, and he wanted them. And he basically stuck him up. What size are they? Blah, blah, blah. No rules, no shame, no nothing. Took the shoes off him and put it in, right? Now, another time, I was in a church with him and he robbed a man of his chain and cross, barefaced, while everybody was in the church, right? Blatantly. On that rerun, he come back to Whitemore. I think this would have been around about the last time I saw him, you know, sadly. I did like Arthur, he was all right as well, but he was an out and out robber, man. It's just nothing that nobody don't know, and died in that way as well. But yes, I'll never forget it. He was involved in another chain argument, a platinum chain with a cross, right? But he was supposed to pay. No, he was meant to be selling the chain to the geezer and then asked for something on ChECK, but changed his mind. Took the thing on ChECK, but said, no, I've changed my mind. I'll get the P back to you, kind of thing. I don't want to sell it no more. So he's already had 100 quid up front, but now he's saying, nah, he ain't gonna do it. He ain't gonna do the deal. Now, he's ended up having a fight on the landing with the biggest geezer in Whitemore at that time, a geezer called Bolo. It's about 7 foot or 6'8". I don't even think Danger or Ezra was bigger than him, or they were about the same size, but Bolo wasn't of the caliber of Ezra, but he was absolutely massive, and he wasn't called Bolo for nothing. We know why, because of the Bruce Lee film. So imagine he's gone to have a row with Bolo over the cooking, and while they're fighting, someone's gone in there and nicked his chain. So imagine being wrapped up by the screws. They ain't banged up the door, and someone's gone in there. He knows who it is, and he's down the block and he's sending messages up to try and get the chain back. The geezer's gone down the block on the numbers, run off with the chain of numbers. These are the karmas that come with it. Do you see what I mean? You rob the chain, you come somewhere else with it, somebody else nicks it off you, you're down the block on something else, but you can't mix it, you ain't got a chance to get it back, because the geezer's now hiding down the block. I don't know what's wrong with me today, my memory's a bit bad. No, we've done what's his name. Oh, we done what's his name. Even my old mate Paul Flynn as well. Another nice guy, lovely fella, Paul Flynn. But I remember going on a couple of missions with him, and he had a dig. That's the geezer that I told you had a fight with Paul Sykes down the block in Parkhurst. That's the one I was telling you about, Paul. And he's alive. I think he's away now. He's a good geezer, Paul, man. I knew his brothers and all that. But when he gets going, he's a right handful. That was the first time that I ever saw Sykes and heard all the stories about him. But on that day, well, whether we say the screws were there or whatever, you could say anything you want. But what I saw that day is that Paul was getting the better in some way, if you get what I mean. That's being perfectly honest, and you know that I'll tell you the truth. Yeah, I mean, what's wrong with you tonight? You can't remember I think that was it. Oh, yeah, Dennis Brown. Terror and Soldier Mark as well from Peckham mentioned as well as old hardcore robbers from Peckham. And on the out as well, Marcus Jurgen from East as well. Another one who no matter who you know, I'm not going to say the robbing of men makes you any kind of bad man or whatever, because there's bullying types as well, where you're preying on easy victims by walking in and taking their burn or taking their cards and that kind of stuff. I'm more talking about, these ones are more braver. They're not picking and choosing their victims. They are going in on anybody and anybody. And the other one that I forgot to mention was Gary Staggs from North London, who is a living legend. I'm not sure, I think he's not well at the moment. Gary Staggs, quote me on that, I'm not too sure. But one of my old muckers, Gary Staggs, had tremendous bottle and had 2 great escape attempts, allegedly, and got away. Very hard to do that on certain escorts, Gary, but also could turn into a robber himself. I remember one morning him coming for me and saying, Yammy, I think I've got a bit of trouble, come upstairs with me. And I went upstairs with him, and there was a two geezers first thing in the morning, and I've come through the door, and he said, Yammy, don't worry about these two, just leave it to me. And I was just looking and thinking, yeah, but what if you want the both of them, gal, kind of thing, you know? They wouldn't surprise me, because I knew that he could have a go as well. But he knocked the shit out of both of them, and ended up taking up the parcel and coming out, and never needed no help off me. So if there's any other names you want me to remember and stories, remind me. All you got to do is give me the name, and I'll tell you exactly what it was. But yeah, that's the story for tonight. If anything more comes up, I'm going to travel now. That's going to be about an hour and a half, more likely tomorrow. Love you loads. Send it loads of love.